And it only took me 6 months to build them. Hey guys, welcome back. These stools did actually take me quite a while to build. A lot of it has to do with the fact of just timing and how long things had to sit in clamps, etc. So I started with building the jig, which I followed the Wood Whisperer's video instructions on how to build a bent lamination jig almost to a T. So I'll link that video below so you can check out his video that goes a little bit more depth on how to build a bent lamination jig. Here's a great trick on how to trace a pattern with basically a circle. So I had to measure in 1/2 inch. So I cut out a circle that had a 1/2 inch inside radius, so I could just trace this. By a show of hands, who remembers the spiral graph? After an excessive amount of spray glue, I applied the cork, which helps even out the clamping pressure on the inner edges of the jig. And to keep everything from sticking to itself, I added a good layer of packing tape to the clamping surfaces. Now I should have done this before attaching the cork, but I did drill holes so I would have an area to insert the clamp to distribute the pressure on the inside and outside of the frame. And then I added these little stop blocks just to help everything line up while I was tightening all the clamps. With my lamination jig ready to go, I started cutting out all my strips, and I did use this gauge to be able to cut consistent strips, which was a good thing because I needed 60 of them. I realized quickly that I had to soak the strips in order to bend them around the frame properly. So what I would do is I would soak the strips, I would put them into the jig, and I'd let them sit overnight, and then I'd come back the next day to glue everything together. So because I only built one of these lamination jigs, this did take me about 2 weeks to complete. I totally feel that bent lamination is one of those albatrosses that a lot of woodworkers look at and think it's not something that they have the skill level for. I would challenge you to do this because you'd find it a lot easier than you think. Only thing I would make the suggestion of is make sure you have enough clamps. Speaking of clamping, no pressure, pun intended, but I'd love to see you hit that like button or even that subscribe button. That helps YouTube know that this is a video that it should suggest to other people. And if you do like what you see, hey, let me know below. And if you don't, you know, you can just skip this video at any time. So if you have been following me on Instagram, you'll probably notice that this is a project that I've been teasing and working on in the background since about February. So it's now September, if that gives you any context of how long it took me to actually get through this project. While I was waiting for things to dry, I started cutting out the walnut pieces I would need to make up the seat backs and the seat bottoms. I went through the standard milling process to be able to get my wood as square as possible. The walnut that I picked for this project had tons of character and actually cut the boards specifically to highlight the knots and to highlight the imperfections of the wood. So it's no river table, but I did use some tinted epoxy just to fill those knot holes, and in some cases coming back to do a second coat just to make sure I had enough fill after it seeped into the gaps. Just make sure that you have some sort of a backer when you're filling voids like this. It's really easy for the epoxy to run all the way through. For me, I just use tuck tape. Once the epoxy was set up, I did send it through the drum sander just to take out a bulk of the leftover material. Because of how deep the stool seats were, I did actually have to join 2 pieces of walnut together, which was super simple with the Festool domino. You could of course just use some kind of a doweling jig or even pocket holes for this, but I paid for the domino, so I'm going to use the domino. I did create MDF templates for the stool bases as well as the backs to keep everything consistent. The templates made it really easy for me to rough cut my seats and backs at the bandsaw, and then I actually used 2-sided tape and a patterning bit to get them to the final size over at the router table. I also created MDF alignment jigs so I could attach the seat bases to the seats themselves. And with those, I cut out grooves specifically for the bent lamination bars that would wrap around to the seat backs. I added threaded inserts to the seat bottoms to attach them to the bases, and I did that off camera, aka I forgot to film that. I did do a dry assembly to make sure that everything lined up properly, and with everything fitting properly, I was able to add the roundover to all the pieces for the stools. Before applying finish, I did sand everything up to 180 grit, and I used some mineral spirits just to test out what the grain looked like before adding finish. One tip I saw from Jay Bates a few days ago was if you're going to use a water-based finish, a great tip is to actually water pop the grain and do another round of sanding, so that way your first coat of finish doesn't pop the grain. I want to keep the bent lamination pieces as simple as possible, so I just used maple plugs to plug the screw holes. Like I said, I did use a water-based finish, and this is General Finish's semi-gloss water-based finish. I think it's a high performance, and this really helped the grain pop, and I did several coats of this. Just for some context, this is actually what the stool bases and backs looked like prior to this project. So I think these were a bit of an upgrade. So with the stool bases attached to the seats, I could call this project done. So this is probably one of the most rewarding projects I've done this year. I think because it was something that I'd never tried before. If you have any questions about bent lamination or about these stools, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to be able to answer those questions. We'll see you guys next time.